His funeral was a lavish occasion attended by thousands. His death left a serious power vacuum in Jerusalem. It was a situation that the British had to resolve quickly. Samuel realized that if there was any chance of creating stability in the region, then the right person had to be appointed as the Mufti's successor. Samuel wasted no time in selecting Muhammad Amin al-Husseini to fill the role. To enhance the authority of their chosen man, the British suddenly bestowed a brand new title on him. Not only would he be the Mufti of Jerusalem, he would be the Grand Mufti of Palestine. That is the spiritual leader of not only Jerusalem's Muslims, but of all Muslims in Palestine. It was a job for which he was barely qualified.
The kind of education that would be relevant to the post of Mufti is, of course, religious education, theology. And he didn't achieve this. He started, but he interrupted to go to serve in the army in the First World War and never resumed this education. So he has to be someone who very much learned in the Islamic theology, and that was certainly not the case with Amin al-Husseini. So this person who was designated as the Mufti of Jerusalem and Grand Mufti of Palestine by the British authorities in 1921 was barely 26 years old, so very, very young person for the job.
He was such an unlikely choice that even his own people didn't think him fit for the job.
He was not even part of the 3 persons that were selected according to the normal procedure by the community of religious persons in Palestine for the job. So he was just picked by the British High Commissioner for Palestine, Herbert Samuel, who happens to be a Zionist himself, actually, who picked just Amin al-Husseini and designated him in this job that the British authorities had renamed Grand Mufti of Palestine in order to stress the fact that this was the highest spiritual authority on the territory of their mandate.
But despite his lack of qualifications, al-Husseini took office on May 8th, 1921. And from then onwards, his power and authority seems to keep on growing.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allah.
Within a year, he'd been elected president of the Supreme Muslim Council. At the age of just 26, he was now both the religious and political leader of the Arab community in Palestine, making him a hugely powerful player in the politics of the Middle East. At first, what looked like a high-risk appointment initially seemed to work. Al-Husseini worked hard to keep the peace. Towards the late 1920s, there were regular violent clashes between Palestinian Arabs and Jews. Jewish properties and even synagogues were attacked and destroyed. But the Grand Mufti was often seen attempting to restore order during the violence. Yet despite his attempts to keep the peace, there would soon be a dramatic turn of events that put him back on a collision course with the British. Those events occurred in Germany.
Sie wollte eine wahrhaftige Weltanschauungspartei sein. Und zweitens, sie wollte daher kompromisslos die einzige Macht und alleinige Macht in Deutschland.
By March 1933, support for Adolf Hitler was growing at an unstoppable speed. He'd risen to take total power over the country. He brought democracy to an end, And now, for the first time as dictator, he turned his attention to his driving and overall ambition, the destruction of the Jews.
Des Bekenntnisses, ich glaube, sondern der Schwur, ich kämpfe.
In 1933, the number of Jews in Palestine rose to 209,000.
Because of the explosion of Zionist immigration in the beginning of the 19th this leads to, as a result, an explosion of Palestinian Arab anger and resentment. This is the real challenge for al-Husseini and other Arab leaders at the time. And as the Palestinian Arab population becomes more radicalised because of the situation in Palestine in the 1930s, by the middle of that decade, things really are clearly out of the control of the Palestinian Arab elite.
By 1937, the number of Jews had risen again. The figure now stood at 396,000. But rather than the Mufti blaming the Germans for this influx, the German consul general in Palestine, Heinrich Wolff, informed the Führer that Palestinian Muslims were making sympathetic noises towards the new Nazi regime. New Jewish communities with extensive building programs were continuing to populate Palestine. But news for the Arab population was about to get even worse. In London, the British government rejected a demand made by al-Husseini and other Arab leaders for an official council, designed to give them more control over their homeland. It was a bitter blow to their hopes of establishing a group to represent the views of the wider Palestinian Arab population.
The members of Parliament who rejected the proposal of a legislative council did so because of the fear that this would undermine Britain's commitment to Zionism, and there was widespread belief in the Houses of Parliament that Zionism was per se a good thing. The members of Parliament continued to believe the old narrative that European migration in the shape of Zionist migration would raise the living standards of the Palestinian Arabs, that the Zionists were civilizing the backward Orient. And that was the spark that led to the uprising.
Arab leaders in Palestine now called for a general strike. It meant a total refusal to pay taxes, and a countrywide strike of all Arab workers and businesses. The Arab leadership quickly organized themselves to coordinate further political demonstrations and strikes. They formed the Arab Higher Committee. Its role, to make demands of the British government during the unrest. The head of this new organization was the Grand Mufti himself. The Grand Mufti declared that the strike would continue until all Jewish immigration into Palestine was stopped. During the summer of 1936, the strikes brought the region to a standstill. Shops and businesses were forced to close throughout Palestine. It immediately caused widespread unrest. As violence broke out, the country's infrastructure was smashed. The transport network was sabotaged. British troops were sent in to quell the rising violence. They targeted Arab gangs who were attacking Jewish communities indiscriminately. It was the start of a 3-year-long bloodbath that became known as the Arab Revolt. During that first summer, thousands of acres of Jewish farmland were destroyed. The British tried in vain to keep the peace. But by October of 1936, with the revolt already 6 months old, an estimated 1,300 people had been killed. The British set up and dispatched a committee to the region, known as the Peel Commission. Its task was to investigate the reasons for the clashes and to come up with solutions. But their recommendations would only make things worse for the Palestinians.
The Peel Commission came to a conclusion, including a recommendation which were very clearly tailored according to the wishes of the Zionist movement. That is the partition of Palestine. That was the first clear pronouncement from a British source, official source, on the issue of partition. And of course that was vehemently rejected by the Palestinians, including the Mufti.
The new map gave the Jews their own land in the north, with the British retaining the area around Jerusalem.